From one beauty to another. How lucky are we? Jenn Matthews joins us now.
Oh.
Jenn, welcome to the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. I know this is going to be hard for you, but I want to start by getting your reaction to the horrible news yesterday that Dad did not make the list of finalists from the senior/coach committee. What's your initial take?
Oh, it's nonsense, I tell you. No, you know what? I was upset, onward and upward. I tell you what, I really don't think it's what Cleveland fans wanted to hear, because Schottenheimer and my dad didn't advance, but Art Modell did. So,
yeah, that was trash.
Not great. Hopefully he won't get in.
God, I just can't imagine he does. But
what's the vibe like at the Matthews compound?
You know what? I think us kids are more upset than my dad is.
I bet.
He's like, I said, I'm sorry, Dad. And he's like, you know what, Jennifer? I don't need awards. I enjoyed playing the game. It would be an honor if I was put in. And I'm like, no, but it's not fair. And I'm talking to my brother Clay, and he's like, it's ridiculous. So he's actually the one comforting us. But you know what? Onward and upward, like I said. Congratulations to all the people who did advance. So now there are 24. And then I believe the voters meet on August 12th or so, or the 15th, to take it down further. But he will make it. And you know what? It's going to be like the brides whose weddings were canceled 5 million times during COVID. We're just going to party extra hard when he does.
You know, on that note, is your brother, I know your brother had a tremendous career. Where is your brother in terms of a Hall of Fame support? And maybe, just maybe, if we can dream for a second, can you imagine if they go in together? Maybe that's what everybody's waiting for.
I knew you were going to say that, because people have brought it up, and it's the best point ever. I would not argue if that happened. I would be happy as can be. I think people would get sick of us, though. They'd be like, oh, these Matthews are everywhere. But I'm up for that. We can party twice as hard.
That'd be a great storyline.
It'd be a hell of a party.
And the NFL likes a good storyline, you know? They got a little bit of WWE in them sometimes, and I could actually see them possibly, like, messing with that. Who knows?
I know. It'd be great. It'd be a great story, because your brother, in my mind, as I think of your brother and his career, he was a dominant player for a long time on a great team, and that's the formula. That's what you need.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And really, you know, they always have this magic number of 100 sacks. And Clay's like, wait a second, they moved me inside. He's almost there, but he's like, they moved me inside for 3 years when they were struggling on the inside. So he was a middle linebacker, and he ended up kind of shooting himself in the foot because he did so well that they're like, can you stay here? But then it was like, wait a second, we're paying this guy the big bucks to pass rush. He's an edge rusher. We'll put him back. So it all worked out.
Yeah.
They must take that kind of stuff into consideration.
I would think they do. Yeah, I would think they should.
So.
Yeah, they should. And those that know the game understand that it didn't mean he had less impact, because to your point, he was so good after the move that they stopped having to worry about that long term.
Right.
Who was gonna fill that role?
It's always so tricky with defensive players. Same thing with offensive linemen, because there's not as many stats, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
You know, with wide receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, you have a better feel for whether they're a Hall of Famer.
It's also hard to compare generation to generation, because the game has changed so much.
100%.
Clearly, guys are getting more sacks now because the quarterback is dropping back to pass a hell of a lot more.
100%.
So it's a passing league. So those that are compiling all these sack numbers,
right?
It was just a different game when your father played, and even when your brother played, it's changed since then.
100%.
It's a different league.
Right. And now you have, you know, incredible athletes like Myles Garrett, who they just line him up and let him rush, as they should, because that's where he's best.
Right.
So the game has changed, but you know what? It's okay. We're competitive enough. We're like, all right, so we got knocked down. We'll get back up a little. We got a little Vince Lombardi in us, and it'll all work out as it's supposed to. But definitely not a good day for Cleveland fans when I saw, wait a second.
Do you think there's an anti-Browns bias? A lot of fans feel that way. Like the teams that have won more often, the Steelers, maybe get benefit of the doubt on players more. Do you think that factors in?
I do. And I think that's a great question. You would think there would be a bias towards us because we're a hop, skip, and a jump from Canton, but I do think so. Because inevitably, like now, teams who win and who have been winning get more media coverage. It all plays into it. So it has to have a say in it. But I would love to have I would love to see more and more Cleveland players go in. And if Canton wants to fill that stadium, that's what they'll do, because Cleveland will show up and take over.
You aren't kidding.
I'm going to pitch this to you. You know, maybe maybe you need to advocate a little bit more aggressively. And by that, I mean maybe in the off season, the Matthews boys, all of them, get into an SUV. They travel around the country and go to each of these sports writers' houses and just show up there in a very friendly manner and say, hey, here's why we think my dad deserves to be in. Don't intimidate necessarily if they get that impression. And most sports writers are pretty big nerds and will be terrified if a bunch of Matthews pull up to their house. And just be like, here's his stats, here's a PowerPoint, and then just see if maybe that changes some minds.
And then challenge them to a game of football.
And then challenge him to a game of football, and we'll show you how good he is. Have you thought about using more intimidating tactics like that? You've got all these Matthews brothers.
You know what? I really ought to add that to my repertoire. Intimidation. I was just thinking of creating awareness of my dad's amazing career, but maybe we've got to move to those sort of, that approach.
Jen, I think you need to go along too. Jen needs to go on that tour too, because you're the best advocate, the biggest advocate for anybody's Hall of Fame candidacy I've ever seen. It's tremendous the work that you're doing for Dad.
And Jay, when my dad did that interview with you, remember, he was like, oh my gosh, I'm so uncomfortable. He told me to stop. And I said, and I respect my father so much. And I said, Dad, I do have to willingly disobey you because this is ridiculous. And he's like, oh gosh, all right, fine, I'll pick my battles. But
sometimes
I'll
we
keep
know best.
fighting.
Hey, Jen, I don't know if somebody had to ask you this at one point in time. You got all these brothers and your uncles and your dad, they played football. What would be your best position if you played football?
Good question.
Okay. I want them to line me up on the edge and let me pass rush. I want to do some bull rushes. I swear, sometimes I'm like, man, that would be so, when you're angry, and I like to think I'm a pretty nice person. I'm pretty level-headed. But I'm like, man, if they could just line me up and I could use some of those moves. I used to, Kevin Green, the late Kevin Green, when he coached Clay, he loved a good bull rush, and I don't think they do this anymore. I don't think I'm getting anyone in trouble. No, this isn't college football. Okay, he used to get a bottle of wine for every sack, and Kevin loved a good bull rush. So I would just watch the moves, and I'm like, I think I could do that, or I'd spin out that way, or a little juke this way. But and then just that when you've gotten around the O-lineman and you're coming from the edge, and you see the quarterback, especially if it's on the blind side, and you're like, oh, I got this. This is like,
can we get a TikTok video with your fiance / husband trying to block you, and you working the swim move and the hands push pulls?
I love it. No, but remember, we can't. I've got to lay the quarterback down. I don't want to get a, roughing the passer. Clay became
so delicate these days.
I'm not really sure how you're supposed to sack a quarterback without having your arms
You're
around
supposed
him.
to pull his flag.
That's it.
Let me lay him down and then go, good luck next time.
You have to apologize to him too when
you got to hit him between his belly button and his groin.
Yeah, he's got a very small target area.
The thing is, when you watch the highlight videos from back in the day, even my dad's stuff, I'm like, it was just a more violent game. I'm like, that would have been a flag. That would have been taken back. That would have been called out. It would have been ejected. And it was just how they played. It wasn't that any of the guys were dirty players. And I'm all for protecting and making it safe, but there's a line when it's like, well, this is tackle football, so you kind of know what you're saying.
Yeah, it's
Bernie Kosar's mostly made of screws and washers and bolts at this point. He can't even get through TSA, the poor son of a gun.
Bernie's one of my favorites of all time. He was always so good to me, and now it's like, to run into these guys in present day, as an adult, especially when I haven't seen him in years, and I say, hey, Eric Metcalf, I'm Jennifer Matthews and Clay's daughter, and there's kind of this oh, you grew up, you were just a little kid.
Right.
I'm like, that happens.
They thought you'd be a little kid forever.
McNuggets has a question. Go ahead, Mike.
Jen, we've talked about you coming in studio at one point, so maybe when you come, we could set up some one-on-one pass rushing drills between you, Bull, Polk, G, and Jay. But just initial guess, who you beating off the line the worst out of these four on the panel right now?
Well, I'm the biggest guy, so. Well, G's the biggest guy. I don't know.
There is no right answer here. I have to.
Yeah, there's none.
You take me down, Jay.
Hey, look, you do mess with Mike Polk.
You take me down.
I'd have to block her. You're not going to just beat me out the ball. You can't have that. My parents are watching me.
Scrappy. He's like, no, you're not. I'm not going down easy. I could see you getting a little scrappy, G. I don't know.
Yeah. I can see
Oh
that.
yeah, we'd be in here. They'd be like, you guys can't do that. You're holding her. What are you doing? They're like, security. There's a big black guy. No, you can't say that.
Hey, Jen, training camp started yesterday. The Browns got moved indoors because of rain, so there wasn't a whole lot going on. But I'm curious your earliest memories when Dad would go off to camp. What do you remember about those times?
Yeah, I remember them very vividly because he played from, I mean, not my first few years, but from the time I was born until I was 15. So he would always go. So we lived in California in the off season. So he would go back ahead of us. And we were always so sad because we wouldn't get to see him for a few weeks. So my mom said if we promised to behave for a month, which that would have been a sheer miracle in and of itself with 5 of us and 4 boys, she said we can go to Toys R Us. You guys remember Toys R Us? This is
Yeah.
God, just a
It's
tragedy.
coming back. It is coming back.
It is?
Yeah, it's out of bankruptcy. Someone else bought
Yeah, they
them.
screwed their creditors over, and now they're coming back.
Great story. Very uplifting.
American dream.
The American
So we'd
dream, you're
go to
right.
Toys R Us. We'd get a toy, and then my mom would, fly back with the 5 of us, and then they'd have family day and that sort of stuff. But I remember as my dad would prepare leading up to camp, there would be some of the nerves, and as soon as he got back out on the field, he would say, I remember he'd call my mom and say, I still got it. Because I guess in the NFL, you're so replaceable, right? Like, it's a business. There's no loyalty. They're always looking for the, next young, fast, strong guy. And so my dad was, especially in year like 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, he's thinking, man, you got some young guys in here. And then he'd get out there and he said once he got in the groove, he was happy and he was ready for the season, I think, at that point. But you got to understand, too, I mean, we were very fortunate in that they weren't fighting for roster spots. And as you see shows like Hard Knocks and that, you do realize that training camp for a lot of people, it's make or break. They're fighting for a spot on the roster, even if it's a second string position. So it is high stakes. And, my dad said you would have one guy in there, and then the next thing you know, he's gone and he's cleaning out his locker, especially when free agency came into play kind of later on. But I would always feel a sense of like excitement because it meant we were on the verge of another season, which is kind of what it's what they're training for year round.
But let's be honest. I mean, we're talking about your dad had the easy job. Your mom had to schlep 5 kids across the country. That's the tough job.
I
right
know.
there.
My mom's probably like, I'll go to training camp. You deal with these 5 hellions. And
5 kids on a plane. My God.
She should be in the Hall of Fame.
Let's
She
put her
should.
in,
I
too.
tell her, I'm like, she's a saint. Like, and I have there's 5 of us born in 7.5 years. So, but you know what happened? We finally figured out who were the problem causers, and it was my brothers Kyle and Clay. And because we were at an odd number, my mom's like, ding, one year Kyle got separated and Clay got separated. So they were with strangers. I mean, within eyesight. And all of a sudden, all the fighting stopped. So my mom goes, ding, this is amazing. I'm going to see them by themselves all the time, and all of our problems will be solved.
Smart parenting tactic. So Jen, did you guys then? Where did you go to school? Were you living full time in California? And if so, that had to be tough because Dad was never around during the season, I imagine.
Well, that's the thing. So we would split the school year. We would do football season wherever he played, and we'd go to school. We went to regular school. We went homeschool. My mom's like, I'm not homeschooling 5 of you.
God.
And then in the off season, we'd move back to California and go there. So I switched. We all did. We switched schools every 6 months.
Wow.
I did that until I was.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was a pretty shy kid, though no one believes it because I'm outgoing now. But I did have to learn how to go into new situations and, make friends and kind of find something in common. And, I went to middle school in California, Ohio, and Georgia. High school, I would go to fall semester in Georgia, spring semester in California.
Yeah.
So it was just part of our childhood. And I do believe now I'm pretty flexible. You can kind of put me in anywhere and I just roll with it. I survived 4 brothers. Don't I deserve some sort of award?
You do, but you know what, Jen? I feel like you should almost be some sort of ambassador for education. Like you probably better than anyone can speak to how Ohio's education stacks up against California's. Did you have
Let's
a
not
favorite
discuss
place that
that.
you went to school you might want to
Yeah,
say
I don't
Ohio?
think we can talk about
We're losing that battle.
Yeah, we're like below Alabama.
Well, let's
right
wait.
now.
Let's ask the expert. Who did it best? And it's okay if it's not Ohio. That's fine.
No, I had a great education in Ohio. I loved living in Ohio. You know, this anti-Cleveland sentiment across the country. They'll say, "Oh, where have you lived?" And I'll say, "Cleveland, Ohio," and they're like, "Oh, the armpit of America." And I'm like, "Have you been there?" They're like, "No." And I said, "Where do you live?" You know, they're like, "I live in Buffalo, New York." I'm like, I'm just gonna say, I loved Cleveland. I loved my schooling there. People take their sports seriously, and I played 4 sports. I love the fan. Like, we really did love our experience there. And Georgia, I was in high school at the time, so it was a little bit harder. You know, and I go down to Georgia, and it was so interesting down there because people live and breathe. Yes, they live and breathe Ohio State football, and they live and breathe the Browns. You go down to the South, and for the most part, it's college football. People are kind of like, South, you know.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting because they were kind of, it was like college football and high school football took, you know, were the priority, and then NFL was kind of like, whatever, give or take.
Southerners are not known for their taste.
That education thing did have to be, I mean, that sounds very daunting for a kid, but it did have to be a little bit easier being you, because can you imagine just being in high school and you're just like, we just got this new girl in our class. She's an attractive woman, and it's Clay Matthews' daughter. I mean, like, that's exciting. Like, if I'm jumping high schools as like a ginger with braces,
he's getting beat up in 2 different schools.
My dad has like a furniture store somewhere. Like, nobody cares, but you probably were a cool kid.
Yeah, I would like to think it was my kindness and my, you know, great sparkling personality. But no, people were afraid. Although I had like my friends' mom saying like, "Your dad is so attractive. Your dad's such a star." And I remember being like 8 years old.
Shout out to him.
No, that's creepy. To say that to a kid.
I know. Here's the thing. So fast forward to now, I have like 80-year-old women who like, "Oh, that brother of yours," and I'm like,
you still got it. Shout out to them. Listen, he still got it. If I catch him in his mirror with the slick back, like, they know I'm Clay. I got that 57 jersey.
Well, no one. Did you see how Aaron Rodgers showed up to training camp? Like some Nicolas Cage vibe?
That was, you know what? That's exactly what it reminded me of. I was kind of disturbed by it. Have you guys seen the video?
I've seen it.
Yes.
Wow. Can you call that up on Tag Board? We're gonna show that for our viewers, and there's some things you just can't unsee. But honestly, when I saw it, my first thought was, he might need counseling. Mm-hmm. I mean,
he's trying to prove.
No,
something.
he was doing a bit. It was a Nick Cage remake. He was doing
okay. I didn't read anything. Okay,
yeah, that's the thing with the Nicolas Cage vibes.
Wait a second, you're wrong.
Aaron has expressed his disdain for the media, but I think he's for someone who doesn't like the media. I'm like, he sure knows. To play the game.
No. Here's the true story about what happened. He had to spend the whole offseason pulling the chicken bone from choking yet again in the playoffs out of his throat, and he got blood all over his sleeves, and that's why he had to rip them off. Okay,
so this was a spoof. This was a parody. I feel better about that now, because when I saw it, I just looked at it and I'm like, what in the hell is wrong with it?
Yeah.
Hey man, way to sell it. Way to sell it. If you're gonna do a bit, sell it. I like it. Go ahead, do your thing, Aaron Rodgers.
Con Air, right? Yeah.
You're okay with it?
It's a Con Air look.
Are you guys ready to see this side by side?
Yeah.
Sure.
Of the kid from
Aaron
Con Air,
Rodgers. Yeah, give us actually 1 second.
So
it's loading
so
as
this
we
is kind of
speak.
like when Baker Mayfield did the Brett Favre draft photo spoof. Remember,
yes,
I remember that. He's wearing
they
the
reenacted
jorts
that.
and the huge cordless phone.
They've had an exact identical career so far.
We're missing an opportunity here. I saw Aaron Rodgers' long hair.
Yeah.
I'd be amiss to say your brother also. He was known for the long locks of hair. Do you like the short hair or do you like the long hair?
That's a good question. You know, my dad played with the long hair, the flow coming out of the helmet.
He did.
And then I got to tell you, his last year, he's in Atlanta, and he comes home one day, and he didn't tell anyone, and he had cut it. We're like, who are you? Where's my dad? And he said to us, I don't want to be another 40-year-old with long hair. I don't want to be that. You know, and so it took a while for us to get used to it. So Clay is at USC, right? He's a walk-on. He's hardly getting any playing time. He's like, I'm going to start growing out my hair. So, of course, it went through that incredibly awkward stage where you're like, is it short? Is it long?
It's like a Prince Valiant, yeah.
Yeah, it was just this real awkward stage. And then he got out of it and he just kept growing it. And he does, I have to say, have good hair. I mean, he got a hair deal out of it. I'm like,
you guys got good genes.
He's getting paid for his hair, and I'm the girl, just like, well, that's cool. But he just kept letting it grow, and then it became this thing. But it kind of got a little ridiculous when people were doing slow-mo videos of like him spraying the water. And he's like, that wasn't meant to be this like very dramatic thing. He goes, my hair when it was dry would get caught in the clip of my helmet, like, you know, where you button it in. And he said at Lambeau, he'd get icicles when his hair was wet.
Nice.
And I'm like, this is more information than I care to know. But
Nice.
yeah, so I typically go with short hair, but it worked for him. I mean, I don't know, if you're like in finance and you show up with like a man bun, is that cool?
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
probably not gonna
no.
work.
Just for some context on that Aaron Rodgers thing, let's take a look at the
Here we
side
go.
by
All
side.
right, so this
Yeah.
is Aaron Rodgers. Let's take it. So that's him showing up to camp. Now
Right.
let's see Nick Cage and Con Air.
As Cameron Poe, that was his name in the movie.
Very good.
Did he do the wink though? I mean, Aaron, if he's really going to go into character, we
should
need
be.
some like.
She's right.
I mean, he kind of on him. He
kind of nailed it.
Yeah, he did nail it.
I love this bit. I really do. I support it. I mean, I think it's kind of.
Now that I know he's just pulling everybody's chain with it, I'm okay with it. But when I just saw the video, I didn't read anything about it. I just saw it. I'm like, what in the hell is this guy doing?
Yeah.
What?
It's
so
not
he-
someone like poison him.
but hey, he owns it for sure.
That's
He
the least
definitely
disturbing
owns it.
thing that Aaron Rodgers has done over the
Yeah,
last couple
yeah,
years,
exactly.
I think. Yeah, so that's fine.
Wow, that's a look.
All right.
That's a look for sure. Maybe he's trying
He
to.
committed. I will say, if you're going to channel someone, at least look like him. So I will give him credit. I mean, not sure why, but he committed. He worked on his arms, like. Right?
Yeah. He definitely spray tanned too.
Did everybody know Nicolas Cage was Francis Ford Coppola's son?
I did, yeah.
I
did not
just
know that.
recently found that
Well,
out.
he dropped the name.
Really?
Yeah,
I think it's his
no,
nephew.
Oh,
yeah.
you didn't know?
I think it's his nephew.
And specifically
Or his
changed
nephew,
his
I'm
name.
sorry.
Yeah,
Nephew.
specifically changed his name because he didn't want
Right.
everybody in the business to say that he rode his uncle's coattails.
But he did actually get help from his uncle and wrote his
course
uncle's
he did.
coattails. He just didn't want everyone to know
well,
about
what was
it.
funny was he changed his name, but he told everybody that his real name was.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what? I mean, you know, it's like what? Yeah, that's a true story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you need any more
You know,
Nicolas
you
Cage
guys are
trivia?
just full of helpful information.
No,
I
it's
learn something
it's
new
useless.
every time I'm showing you.
But it's useless information, honestly. Like,
You know what? But
we
I'm
have all
going to
these
pull that out
tidbits
the
and-
next time I'm at a dinner party, and I'm going to say, you know, in case anyone was wondering, Nicolas Cage, and then they're going to be like, how do you know this? And I'm just going to smile and go, don't worry about it.
Ultimate
Yeah.
Cleveland Sports Show.
We'll let
Yeah.
you use that. We'll let you
Hey,
use that.
we have to ask you because you were on when we talked last time you were on. We talked about USC and UCLA heading to the Big Ten, and then yesterday during our program, the news broke that the Big Ten is also in talks with Cal, Stanford, Washington, and Oregon.
They have to change the name of the conference. It's just
well,
stupid.
I think just go for
I know,
20
it's
and
so
call it the
Yeah.
Big 20.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I don't know. What do you make of all this?
This is so interesting, right? Because they have their media day, and the Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren says, "I'm not actively poaching people, but and it has to be strategic." All right, let's call a spade a spade. Strategic means like money's the bottom line. Is this like going to make us money? Now, when you look at SC and UCLA, LA is the second biggest media market, so
Right.
it's like, of course, it's going to make sense. Well, now I actually kind of feel badly for Oregon because now they're in this like kind of leftover. You know, the top talent's gone. And now, okay, if they go, yes, exactly. It's stupid that it's called the Big Ten. You're like, at this point, it's like the Big 78 or something. But I don't know. Because then if Oregon, Cal, Stanford, and Washington go, what the heck happens with like the Arizona schools, BYU, Utah, and Washington State? It's just like this. It's like the worst of the worst left. So we'll see. They said they wouldn't make an announcement until the media, right? You know, that contract has been dealt with in August. But what are your guys' thoughts on that? I mean, is this just like a joke now? Or are we going to have
the
like
whole
3
thing's a
mega
joke. There's no
conferences?
rivalries.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care. The rivalries don't matter to me because I didn't grow up with it. But like the whole thing's stupid. They should just the SEC and the new SEC and the new Big Ten should take their 20 schools each, break away, and then just do a playoff between those two conferences.
That's where it's going.
It can't even. It's not even a conference anymore. It's a whole league. I mean, it's just silly. It's silly.
And the thing is, the landscape of college football has completely changed, right?
Yes.
We have the playoff system, we have name, image, likeness. Like it's just, I'm a bit of a traditionalist, and I did like when I was at SC, we were the Pac-12. When my parents were there, it was the Pac-8. So it is kind of sad that you think there was tradition, but
They're going to be the
I
Pac-8
mean-
again.
right, they're going
Yeah.
backwards.
Yeah.
Adding
Forward.
What's crazy,
Yeah,
Jennifer,
I
is
mean, it's going to be a logistical issue because, you know, Kevin Warren was saying, well, we're going to have 4 time zones and it's the first coast-to-coast conference. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, that means that the West Coast teams, you know, SC and UCLA are going to be playing some really late games.
Right.
Well, no, early games. And then, people on the East Coast are going to be playing on, Pacific time. I wouldn't want to be doing the scheduling or the logistics or the traveling, but I guess that's the way the landscape's going. So you have no choice whether we like it or not. It's all about the bottom line, which is dollars. And these media, the Big Ten media rights are said to be over $1 billion.
They add these teams, it's going to be even more. And the crazy thing, though, guys, is forget football. Football is once a week. What about all these other sports? Like, is the women's volleyball team going on a Tuesday from Rutgers to Stanford? I mean, it's just so stupid.
Basketball? I know you think about basketball, baseball, where you have more than a game. Yeah. And then they were trying to talk about the academics. Look, I am all for academics. I was valedictorian in high school. I graduated with honors. I am all for academics. But let's be honest. I'm like, when Kevin Warren is talking about academics, I'm like, or we could talk about media deal. Like, I know it's the PC thing to say, and it sounds good. We want to make sure we're going after academic powerhouses.
Yeah, but how these suits stand up there with a straight face and talk about what you just
ridiculous.
It's it's insulting. It's insulting because we know that it's not true. We know they're lying to us.
You don't care about that at all.
They're trying to virtue signal that we really are about educating these kids. No, you're not. You're about making money, and you're proving that every single move you make. One thing that I think, I read this last night, one thing is this could be interesting. So you talk about how do they make this work logistically, and you brought up the 4 time zones. One of the very attractive things about this to the networks is that they would be able to, every week, schedule a West Coast game at 5 o'clock that ends up being in prime time. ABC has had a ton of success with their big Saturday primetime game. Mm-hmm. But ESPN is owned by Disney, which also owns ABC. Right. What they would love to do is be able to program 3 or 4 big primetime games on Saturday night. Put one on ESPN, one on ESPN2, one on ABC. Mm-hmm. With these big conferences, with these big markets from the West, and Stanford and Cal, I know that it's not like it is with the other markets, but it is the San Francisco market.
Yeah.
That's a top 5 market as well. You're programming for primetime Saturday night games. Now you have a smorgasbord of opportunity, and that's not just one big bake sale on ABC every Saturday night. You could have 3 or 4 on your network.
Yeah,
and
it's
make
all
it
about money.
$100%.
Yeah, it's all about money.
And then you look at, they have 5 games, which takes viewership up, which again goes back to the bottom line of dollars. It is what it is. It's a business at the end of the day, and the whole landscape has changed. So,
but you know what? Tell us that. Call us. Don't insult our intelligence and still try to hide behind this crazy notion that we're all about educating our student athletes. No, you're not.
What would the trickle-down effect of this be for the lesser conferences? Has anybody talked about that? What happens to the Colonial League and all that stuff?
It's going to push them into obscurity.
They're already pretty
obscure.
But I'm saying
they are, but even
do
more
they
so.
combine now? Does do they start to try and do this?
I don't know, because the Power 5 has really become the Power 2. Yeah. And so what ultimately happens to the UConns and to the Toledos and the Bowling Greens and all of those schools. Someone at ESPN once told me, I said, why are you making these MAC schools play on Tuesday night? That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Because they give them a week off before it, so they don't play on Saturday. Obviously, you couldn't play on 2-day recharge. But the answer was so quick. He was like, oh, well, gamblers need something to bet on every day of the week. Of course. So that's why we have games. So what these other schools do is say, okay, all of our games are going to be on Wednesdays. And all of our games are going to be on Thursdays. And
why don't they move those whole conferences? Should just move to the spring and have their own championship. People would watch it.
There's been talk of that before, like some of those smaller conferences. Like, what if we did play
screws it up for the NFL.
If it's the NCAA, that won't happen. But we don't know what the future of the NCAA is either, do we, Jen? I mean, who knows if that's going to be a thing 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
And really, what's transpired in college sports the last few years, I mean, I guess some people could have guessed it was going in that direction, but it's changed so much in all of our lifetimes that who knows in the next 10, 15, even 5 years, what the next moves are. So they want to expand the college football playoff system and all that. And it'll just be interesting to see with these mega conferences, what happens. And you do kind of feel badly for I guess some people would say, well, then win and create a good product, but not everyone can be a top tier team. So you do feel badly for some of the schools like the Bowling Greens and out on the West Coast, the, Washington States and stuff, who really kind of only get viewership because they're part of another, conference, or Washington State because they're part of the Pac-12. Now it's like, well, who's going to watch them? SC and UCLA are gone in 2024. Now they're talking, Oregon, Washington, Stanford, Cal. The whole landscape, like I said, it'll be interesting. I do love college football playoffs, though.
It's funny because the sport once was just built on tradition. Everything that
all
college
gone.
football did was tradition, and now that whole foundation bedrock is blown up, and there's probably not a sport that we watch and love changing more right now than college football.
Absolutely.
Jen, have a
And what
great
happens
weekend.
Notre Dame?
Yeah, that's another good question. They're going to have
screw
to.
them.
They're going to have to join a conference at some point.
I
'cause
agree.
You're not going to be able to make it on your own. Have a great weekend, Jen.
Thanks,
Great to
Jen.
see you again.
Bye,
Jen.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Jenn Matthews with us on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. McNuggets.